Hey, this is Judah Mantel from SceneForge Studio, and in this video I'm going to go over version 0.6.18. It has some great improvements to the way the visuals and sky system works, and it allows for much more customizability of the way your scene looks. So let's jump right in. So I have this basic scene here. It's the same one I've been using for a while in these videos, and you can see the sky is very empty. It's very clear. That's because if I were to go to visual settings, you'll notice that it has changed quite a bit. The first thing you'll see is that there's now a sky rotation slider that I'll talk about in a minute, and there's no weather selector. Now, the removal of the weather selector was a difficult decision, but it was ultimately decided that not having presets allows you to do much more with the sky dome and skybox itself. And then if you did want effects like rain or snow, you can create them from scratch using the VFX graph editor that I talked about in a previous video. So it works in mostly the same way. You can adjust the time of day, and you'll see that there's a couple improvements. One, the clouds look much more, blended with the scene, reacting to the time of day, everything like that. We have really nice sunsets that you can be created, and you can see the scene gets much darker, much more realistic nighttime with skies like that. Now the other thing you'll see is that there's a sky rotation slider, allows you to have control over the angle of the sun. So the scene time controls essentially the X rotation for the time of day, and the sky rotation controls the angle at the direction that the sun is facing without changing the time of day. And what's cool is that this allows you to do a couple things. One, control where the sun is facing, which is useful for just getting interesting shots. You can see the sun affecting our character here. And two, you can see the clouds respond to the direction of the sun appropriately, which is really great. And if you're at like sunset, for example, you can use this to reframe where your sunset is, which just makes it even easier to control. So that's the updated procedural sky system that gets generated on the fly. And you can see we still have the same fog settings and cloud settings as before. Now the clouds look a lot better in my opinion. Now, at the moment, the fog was simplified a little bit to just have horizon fog. That's just because, as the systems are work in progress, more and more accurate and advanced fog will be added down the line. But for now, the fog density works pretty well. And of course, you can select an automatic color or manually select the color you want. Now, an eyedropper was selected, allowing you to have a specific control. And usually you want your fog to match the color, the horizon color of your sky. So this just gives you an extra option for configuring that. Now the main thing, other than the changes to the actual system overall, is this new section for HDRI sky settings. Now if you don't know, an HDRI file is essentially a high dynamic range image, usually a wide or panoramic 360 image, that can be used to create your own skyboxes from an image, as opposed to the procedural one that has been here in the past. Now these HDRI files can be downloaded from a number of places. You can create them yourself, but I downloaded a few from HDRI Haven, which is a great website for accessing HDRI files completely for free. So you can see here there's a huge library of 360 or panoramic images of different locations in the desert, even some interior ones, which I'll show, which is pretty cool. And rather than using the procedural skybox, you can just import your own HDRI. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to my downloads folder, and I'm going to grab this one here. Now, these are large files, especially if you do 4K and up, which you probably will want to. It does take a second to import, depending on the size, but once it does, you'll see that the sky gets replaced with this custom skybox. And you can control the exposure, as well as the height offset of the sky. If I were to go below the ground, you can see that this sky just takes up everything. But because the horizon line may not match, you can just adjust it here. And you can use the sky rotation slider to adjust the angle of the rotation of your background. Now you'll see that the sun is moving with this because you still have full control over the procedural scene lighting independent from the sky. The ambient lighting is now being taken from the skybox, but for the directional light, you still control it manually. So it's not going to do it for you, so you're going to have to adjust the scene time to roughly match your HDRI file, but you can see it does work pretty well. Now for fog, this is where the non-automatic or eyedropper fog comes into play, because you're going to want to select a fog color that matches the horizon, and you can adjust it now, and it looks a lot more well blended in, especially if you have a ground texture that kind of matches what you're going for here. Now again, the fog is going to be improved significantly in the future updates, so you'll have proper height fog and things like that. But while the system's in progress, I didn't want to add a whole new system of features all at once. So this works really well for now, and it's only going to be improved in the future. So this is really cool because the HDRI you import is actually getting rendered twice. Once as an actual scene skybox, so you get the ambient lighting. So you can see even if the scene time is completely dark, you get the ambient coloring of the skybox. But in shoot mode, previously you weren't able to pull focus between your subject and the sky because the sky was an infinitely distanced object. But because it's being rendered a second time as an actual 3D object around the scene, you can pull focus between your subject and your backdrop, which is really cool. You can do some interesting things with it. I know this is getting super technical about the way things work behind the scenes, but it does have some improvements that will actively affect your workflow. Now I want to show off an interior skybox just because this is an interesting experiment that's worth playing around with. So I'm going to select this photo studio, and this one took a little bit longer to load, but you can see here we now have this scene. So if I were to go to my ground settings, turn off the ground, and then adjust the height offset, it's certainly not perfectly accurate to the positioning, but for certain shots where you're kind of just controlling the camera in a very specific way, you can use interior HDRIs to do some interesting things, especially when you're doing live compositing with a real actor using a green screen surface. So it's pretty cool. So you can see the floor doesn't quite match up, but it's totally usable for shots like this where you can't see the feet. And if I were to enable the ground for easier placement, you can see it kind of breaks that illusion. But it's something that's absolutely worth playing around with because it is really cool and a lot of fun. You can adjust the exposure and things like that. You can also, of course, clear this out if you don't want to use it anymore, and you have full access to the procedural sky. Now, it's important to note that when you use an HDRI skybox, you're going to want to use the non-automatic fog color, but just make sure to turn it back off when you're done, because otherwise you get this weird effect. So now we have that. And you can see the night skies are now much darker, giving you more room for experimentation with lighting if you want to kind of start from scratch with the scene lighting. Increase the intensity of that. And things like that. And so that is version 0.6.18. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next video.